Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Voice of Authority webinar brought to you today by the Key Worker Homes Fund and developer Skyroom. My name is Toby Fox. I'm the Managing Director at 3Fox, the marketing agency for councils. As regular viewers will know, our job is to keep our network of councils and developers and investors and their influencers and advisors connected. And we're doing that by offering this channel, the Voice of Authority, as a platform for councils to discuss ambitions and challenges and influences and issues of urgency. And we're going to be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. with a conversation about urban air mobility, the risks and opportunities for local authorities. We'll be discussing things like the potential contribution to sustainable growth and the revenue potential, and also the possible liabilities as drone operations gather pace. Join us with law firm Davitt Jones Bould and transport consultant Vectos for a groundbreaking session tomorrow at 11 a.m. and you can register now at thevoiceofauthority.co.uk. But we're here today to help the Key Worker Homes Fund invite bids from councils for its initial phase of £100 million to enable the delivery of homes for key workers. The fund is one part of disruptor developer Skyroom's plan to deliver over 10,000 homes for London's key workers in mutually beneficial partnerships with London's local authorities and housing associations. Why? Because COVID-19 has brought long overdue recognition of the critical role that key workers play in supporting society and sustaining our cities. It's thanks to their efforts that we can live as free and educated and safe people. And the movement in spring 2020 to clap for key workers demonstrated collective appreciation, but we all know that they deserve more than applause. It's as urgent now as it was then to permanently improve their quality of life. So what do they want? What do key workers desperately need? And what can we do to help? This session is going to address those questions. It's the first event in a series of 3 hosted by the Key Worker Homes Fund on the Voice of Authority channel, all bound by the question, how can we improve the lives of key workers in our city? Now, to answer that question, it's a huge pleasure to welcome to the Voice of Authority for the first time, in alphabetical order, Councillor Paul Bell, Cabinet Member for Housing and Planning at Lewisham Council, and Mark Farmer, the London Operational Manager at the Royal College of Nursing, and Councillor Amina Ibrahim, Cabinet Member for Housing and Estate Renewal at Haringey Council, and Arthur Kay, who's the Chair of the Key Worker Homes Fund. And we're going to start this afternoon with a series of case studies from our panelists, followed by a discussion with them and with you viewers via the Q&A function. So make sure you interact with us and we'll look forward to addressing the panel with your questions after these case studies. To start us off, let's go to Mark Farmer of the Royal College of Nursing. Mark, tell us a bit about what your key workers need.
Thanks very much, and thank you for inviting us to this event today. We're really pleased to be able to be here and talk to you about what our members need and what their experiences are. Just by way of background, as a region, we represent over 60,000 nurses, student nurses, healthcare assistants and support workers working across every aspect of healthcare in the capital. So if you can think of somewhere where a nurse or a carer would be working, we'll have members there. And one of the reasons that we're so interested in this is because earlier in the year we released a report looking at our members' experience of living and working in the capital. And overwhelmingly, our members told us that the biggest challenges they faced were the cost of accommodation, the lack of accommodation, and the cost of travel. And it's absolutely crucial that London gets this right. We know already that there's around 9,000 posts that are empty in London, 9,000 nursing posts. And that's just within the NHS. It doesn't include social care or independent settings where there's a shortage of nurses. So our members need, one, a pay rise so that housing becomes affordable, but they also need a greater stock of affordable housing. We know that from the members we surveyed and spoke about earlier in the year, the vast majority of them don't live and work in the same borough. They're facing extremely long commutes to and from work. So if you're working an already long 12-hour shift, probably without a break, you've got a long commute at the end, and that isn't sustainable at all. So what we know is that the majority of the respondents to our survey are looking to leave London and leave nursing within the next 5 years, which will just compound the challenge that we're facing at present. We know that the majority of our members are the main wage earner, so there's a need to identify them as a key worker group and ensure that they have access to an rapidly increased supply of housing. And we need to ensure that there's enough nurses in the capital for a whole variety of reasons. One, obviously, the pandemic that we've been through has highlighted the strain that the NHS can come under, and that's compounded by not having the right workforce in place. We know that communities should be treated wherever possible by carers and nurses and medical staff that reflect that community. People will relate better to carers and nurses if they feel like them and look like them. And that's what we're missing at times in London. And the need for emergency response. If you're in a hospital and a major incident declared and you haven't got a workforce nearby that you can call on in an emergency, your ability to respond to that and to deliver sustainable services is severely compromised. So in terms of what we're asking for, obviously, as I said, there needs to be attention given to nurses' pay, but there also needs to be an increase in the supply and affordability of housing of all types. There needs to be a mixed economy of housing provision so that it isn't just single person flats. There's the ability to stay throughout your career in London. If we look at some of the recent case studies that have come out from other areas, if you take the average property price and the average salary of nurses in London, you're going to have to work for and save for 35 years just to get a deposit together before you even are on the housing ladder to purchase. So that's simply unaffordable for our members and isn't something that London can sustain. And again, it goes back to being able to ensure that people can stay, or nurses can stay, within London for the whole of their career if they want to. We know that the big significant difference, if you're a member of medical staff and you train in London and leave London, you'll more often than not return after about 13 years. If you're a nurse and you leave London, you simply don't return. So that's why there's a massive imperative to ensure that the provision of housing across all levels and all types in London is right.
Thank you, Mark. That's I mean, really striking stuff. There's some terrifying statistics that you brought up there. Was I right in? Did you say that the majority of nurses are considering leaving?
I think it's 70% of the nurses that we surveyed in the report we published earlier. They're looking to leave London within 5 years. And
9,000 posts are already empty.
Yeah.
This is astonishing stuff. Okay, let's go to Councillor Bell. Paul. How does that sort of resonate with the picture in Lewisham, and how does it resonate with other key worker groups that you work with at the council? What are key workers' contribution to Lewisham, and what sort of situation do you feel they're in, and what happens if we don't do anything to help?
So thank you for inviting me onto the panel today. So that resonates with Lewisham quite well, very significantly around the aspect of key workers and what their challenges are facing, particularly around housing and the development of new housing, which is we'll get onto later. In terms of Lewisham, obviously we fought and saved our Lewisham A&E from closure and maternity services. So a large proportion of our workforce, the major employers, are the public sector, particularly NHS, local government. So, but a lot of them don't live in Lewisham, they commute out from outside of Lewisham. A couple of years ago, I had a conversation with the Fire Brigades Union about issues they were facing. And they told me only 2 firefighters actually lived in Lewisham. And they were lucky enough to buy their properties years ago in the 1990s when London was cheaper. But most of the new recruits and the people currently in the fire service, they weren't living local to where they worked. And obviously in a fire, you need to get people there as quickly as possible, particularly if there's an emergency that happens and an incident that needs and requires more resourcing. So in Lewisham, we're trying to address that problem, but fundamentally, the pay in public sector needs to increase. We need to honour and pay tribute to our public sector workers. That includes local government, the NHS. And if you take the example of a home care worker, for example, a home care worker may have more than one job. If they have one job, they will be going from client to client, be working very long hours for very little pay. And then if they don't have access to transport, and our statistics in Lewisham point that the majority of people do not own a car, so they're reliant on public transport. So investment in public transport is absolutely key, as well as generally affordable housing. And in terms of generally affordable housing, in the planning terminology, affordable housing is unaffordable. So it's how we create, enable and support generally affordable homes with security of tenure to keep people there in their local communities. But also, there's a lot of one-bedroom flats and boxes being built in terms of modern flats, and they're not suitable for lifetime homes. And by lifetime homes, I mean people that can live, put roots down, have their children educated, they can live a full life in the place they wish to be. That isn't possible because people outgrow their homes. And when you get into the 2, 3, 4, 5 bedroom area, they become completely unaffordable unless you have the bank of mom and dad to help you. And unfortunately, the majority of people in Lewisham do not have that luxury. So it resonates very well from what Mark was saying to me in Lewisham.
Great, Paul. Thank you very much indeed. Amina, does that resonate also in your borough? And are there any key worker groups who aren't suffering in these ways, or is this across the board?
Yeah, absolutely. What's just been said completely resonates with what's happening in Haringey, and I don't think there are any key worker groups which, because the key workers, where do you start and where do you stop in terms of the definition? And I'm sure we'll come on to that later in some of the questions. But I suppose for us in Haringey, we believe everyone needs a safe, stable, and genuinely affordable home, whatever their circumstances. But in terms of when we're specifically talking about carers, nurses, care assistants, hospital cleaners, teachers, teaching assistants, as well as supermarket workers and delivery workers, and we can kind of delve into a little bit more of the detail of how we should define key workers. But essentially for me, these are the people that keep London running. These are the people that keep society running, and we need to understand and recognize that as local authorities, but national government really needs to kind of step up to the challenge here, because I think that the key is that the title of this event actually is it's great when everybody was out there clapping, and that was an amazing show of solidarity. But what does solidarity really look like when a lot of the people that do this type of work are underpaid, have been facing pay freezes for many years, and it's well and good getting out there and clapping, but we have to actually step up to the challenge and challenge government in understanding and appreciating the commitment that these types of workers actually bring to the work that they do in the way that they're paid, but also in terms of housing as well. So in Haringey, we've committed to a new era of council housing, for example, and we're really ambitious in that we are aiming to start 1,000 council homes at council rents under construction by 2022, and we're hoping that by 2025 we will have completed those homes and started an additional 600. So and we know that many key workers, however, do rent very highly priced homes within the private sector, and we know that the kind of private sector housing bubble that's going on in London for many years is unsustainable. Whilst the council's preference is to build council homes, we recognise also at the same time that priority needs and waiting lists are so vast that it can often feel remote, and it is remote for many people to access council housing. So we also have to look at other types of homes that are built within the local area to make sure, and I think it's really important that actually key workers are able to live in the areas that they serve, that those very long days of work that these workers put in don't mean that they by the time they get home in the evening it can take them hours, and that's really important in terms of making sure that these workers are able to live and work in their local communities, but often in the communities that they grew up in as well. And that's always the challenge. I mean, you know, my own experience, I grew up in Haringey, and I'd like to live in Haringey for the rest of my life, and I'm sure that applies to the communities that many of these key workers work in. So obviously, I think also the final point that I want to make, and this is where we've got to challenge the government. So the group of so the things that I think key workers would benefit from are not necessarily always discounted home ownership, because I think what we understand is that that can even that can be prohibitively kind of expensive, particularly on the salaries that many key workers are on. So I think that's something that means that we need to explore what actually and the rent levels and genuine. And when we talk about genuinely affordable rent, for me, a council rent is a genuinely affordable rent. So the more council homes that we build, the more able I believe key workers will be to be able to access those homes.
Fantastic, Amina. Thank you very much indeed for that. Okay, let's drill down a bit into this then. So what do we mean by a key worker? Paul, in Lewisham, how do you define a key worker? Who is a key worker and who isn't?
Well, to be honest, we don't define a key worker at all, not yet, but we're developing a scheme with Granger, which is called Besson Street, where 324 new homes are being delivered there, of which 35% of those will be at London Living Rent. So as part of the London Living Rent, which obviously is a rent formula from the GLA, from the Mayor of London, we'll be creating our own register for key workers. So we've yet to define what a key worker is, but that needs to be defined by the key workers themselves. So it's all very well people who sit in policy rooms and make policy, but we need to ask the people that work in the NHS, home care workers, as Amina said, people who work in supermarkets, because they've been absolutely essential during the pandemic. So I think a key worker is anybody who provides a public service, either through a private employer or a public employer, that delivers to the local community and contributes in that way. So that anyone can be a key worker, but the affordability aspect can't be ignored. So the London Living Rent properties are a form of rent control. So, and also have longer tenancies, because one of the other key points is security of tenure. We must, and the government must honour its pledge to end Section 21 evictions in the private rent sector, but we must have security of tenure as well. Because without that security of tenure, you can give them 2 months to leave, and you constantly have to move. And the cost of doing so, and the kind of like market that's out there, one of the worst markets is people going to en masse to try and get a private tenancy, which is insecure, often where there are significant problems in the private rent sector. So the government also need to step up and allow us to introduce borough-wide licensing schemes to manage the private renter sector so it's the best it possibly can be. Obviously, people like me and Amina will probably agree with me. We would like rent controls as well. And we'd also like a German model of of private rents, where people can't be asked to leave. They have a security of tenure. And if someone sells that property, they just carry on with that tenancy. So we need major reform there. And the Mayor of London is proposing some major reform. But sadly, we don't have the powers through devolution to do it at the moment. So there's the private rent sector, the security of tenure, and defining a key worker can be anybody who provides a public service to the community, but who can't afford to rent privately or put down roots.
Great stuff. Thanks, Paul. Arthur, we'll come to you in a second, and we'll see what the Key Worker Homes Fund can do about some of these issues. But first, Amina, would you echo what Paul's saying? Is there anything else you'd like to add about defining key workers and how Haringey is going about it?
Absolutely. So we're in the same situation as Lewisham. We currently don't have a definition of a key worker, but what I talked about earlier is it's actually, you know, we shouldn't be restrictive about this. And ultimately it can be, I completely agree with Paul, anybody who effectively delivers a public service, and who, whether it's in the public sector or the private sector, and the kind of jobs that keep our city going, and we're all reliant on to make sure that we can do all of those day-to-day things, whether it's our health, whether it's like, you know, absolutely think that a supermarket worker or a delivery driver is a key worker. And these are often the people on the lowest wages working in the gig economy as well. And this is one of the big challenges, but also like to echo the point that Councillor Bell made as well about what we're seeing, and how this has become apparent since the pandemic, is that key workers kind of over the years have been kind of clubbing together and renting private properties, you know, and coming together to pay the rent. But then when one person leaves, and what we were finding was that then the people that remained responsible for the entire rent, etc., and how that is properly regulated, actually, and making sure that we properly, so not just the affordability, although the affordability element is really, really important, but the conditions that people are living in as well. So an unregulated private sector means that some of the conditions that we're finding in HMOs are really quite appalling. So we've got a number of schemes in Haringey. We're going forward with a selective licensing scheme as well, which covers part of the borough in terms of all property that's rented in the private sector. But it's making sure that when people are living in the private sector, that the conditions that they're living in are and what they're paying for, often at very, very high levels, is actually safe and is actually, you know, what we would expect, and what we would want people, and the conditions for people to be living in. And that's often not the case, unfortunately.
Thanks, Amina. I mean, Mark, does the RCN, do you get involved in housing for your members? Have you ever do you buy property? Do you run property, manage property at all? Do you look at licensing? Do you inspect houses? Do you have any kind of welfare system like that?
We don't provide housing or inspect housing or anything like that. We have a very big welfare arm that supports members when they need financial assistance, and provides everything from housing advice on tenancy rights, mortgage rights, etc., right through to financial assistance and providing charitable support. But we don't run or regulate housing schemes ourselves. But I just wanted to pick up on one thing that I think both Paul and Amina touched on around the conditions that people are living in. And one of the quotes from our survey earlier in the year was from a nurse who I'm sure speaks or words that would be recognised by many nurses, and they responded saying, "I live in a shared house with my partner. I can't afford to live alone with my partner. I can't afford to save a deposit for a house. I cannot afford to have children." And that's surely intolerable as a society, that people are sort of managing their future family options based on where they live and what their job is. That's the issue that we've got to address.
Absolutely. Do you? I'm going to put the cat amongst the pigeons slightly. Do you, as a sort of a London-wide remit, your London-wide remit, do you look at different parts of London and see more favourable offers for your key workers in some parts of London than other, more favourable treatment, or local authorities that have support programmes that you can plug into?
I don't think we drilled down in that much depth in the survey we did. We know that, you know, offers vary across London boroughs, but I think the important thing for us is that the effort and initiatives are raised across London, so that you don't end up with the situation you're describing, where one borough has a better offer than others and you create a workforce inequality. There are some fantastic schemes out there that we know of, but again, this has got to be a London-wide initiative.
And on that note, Paul, what's the art of the possible for London's local authorities in acting as on a London-wide scale to support and look after key workers? I mean, do we have to look at it at that level, or do you have borough-specific programmes and you're focused very much on supporting your own key workers?
Well, we have one borough-specific programme, which is Besson Street, I talked about before.
Yeah.
but this has to be done regionally and supporting locally. The GLA has been very good at supporting local councils build new council homes. But what we also need is that flexibility to apply local conditions to our individual boroughs. So I know next to nothing about Haringey, for example, but in Lewisham, we are a dormitory borough. So people before the pandemic used to commute out of Lewisham. So they slept there, they went out of Lewisham for their jobs. So that is now changing because of the pandemic. So we have to look at the individual circumstances because every London borough is different, but it needs to be coordinated regionally. But I just want to make this point really, and I know it sounds not very hopeful, but the future of London is at stake because we've seen a number of people leave London. I think before the pandemic, there was some kind of statistic around people leaving to go to Birmingham, for example. If people no longer have to go into the office or have a hybrid system, and the centre of London economically is very depressed at the moment, how do we keep people in London? And we don't keep people in London by doing the same old private renter sector, unsecure tenancies, unaffordable properties. So unless we get a grip on this, we will see more and more people leave London, and that will not help anybody or help the situation of people who are in home ownership, for example. So we need to work as a society. And some of the most dangerous language that's been talked about from the government is the language of dependency and talking about people relying on the state. But unfortunately, the state, whether it's local, regional, or national, is an enabler of their local communities because they know their local communities best. And health, education, housing, employment are not dependency, they're fundamental rights. And when we work together as a society, we can actually be at peace with each other. And this housing crisis is predominantly in London, but in other areas. But London is crying out for a new model of how people live their lives in a secure, affordable, generally affordable home. And I know of people who are midwives in Lewisham Hospital, for example, who can't afford to buy their own property, but it's also their children too. So some people who have home ownership at the moment or council tenancy, their children have got very little prospects in terms of getting on the property ladder or even a social tenancy themselves. So we really need to address this for the future of London.
Yeah, we need to address this for the future of London. Amina, can you work on a London-wide basis with other boroughs?
And I just wanted to actually follow up on what Paul said about the dangerous kind of language of the government around dependency culture. I would argue, actually, the state, I mean, the key workers do not depend on the state. The state depends on key workers. The state is by definition, that the state is nothing without what these workers do. So, and it's about understanding and kind of reversing that language and reversing that power dynamic, actually, because the power should be in the hands of the people that deliver the services of the state, and that and ultimately, again, the economy is absolutely dependent on the people who work in supermarkets, the people who deliver the goods that we order currently at the moment, that, you know, we're at home. And ultimately, I think actually it's, and the pandemic and the awful impact of the pandemic should kind of bring home actually how dependent we are as a country and as London on the services that these workers provide. And I think absolutely, and we need to shout that out really, really kind of loudly. But also, you know, if we're talking about the impact as well of the pandemic on those key workers, so when we're talking about the impact on NHS staff in terms of the amount of deaths that we've seen, but also bus drivers, you know, please let's put a big shout out for the services that, you know, public transport workers deliver, and the fact that they put themselves in harm's way in order to protect us and to kind of like deliver services for us. And I think that's really, really important, and it should never be ignored. So completely agree with Paul. Just reverse this narrative about the dependency culture and make sure that the government knows who depends on who. And it certainly isn't the key workers on the state, it's the other way round.
Thanks, Amina. Very eloquently put. Right. I think you guys have made a fairly clear case that key workers need support and deserve support. Arthur, you've been very patiently listening. So the case is made to you. We're crying out for a new model on how to live our lives. That's the call from key workers. Are you going to provide that new model? What is the Key Worker Homes Fund?
Thank you, and thank you for everyone for joining today. Really interesting discussion, and certainly echoes with our experience of talking to key workers and working with them over the past few years. At Skyrim, we actually launched a couple of years ago, and we launched with a white paper. You can find it on our website, or I can send you a copy, which we wrote in 2018 with Richard Rogers and University College London. In that white paper, we laid out the case for providing homes for key workers near to where they work, so they can thrive in the city they support. As you mentioned in your introduction, Toby, and we've heard from the panel, we all have experience of knowing key workers personally and working with them, and whether it be nurses, whether it be doctors, whether it be firefighters, simply they are currently not valued economically by society, but underpin and give us all an amazing quality of life, or the opportunity to have an amazing quality of life here in London. And so this white paper we wrote, and it was well received, but there's been no key worker policy explicitly in housing for decades. And I think it's no shame on either Lewisham or Haringey that you don't have a specific key worker housing policy. This is sadly the norm rather than the exception. And what we were calling for at that stage was we want councils and housing associations and central government to really step up, to work with key workers to try and deliver a specific tenure of housing. And we define key workers actually just very typically, we use the government definition. I think what Amina, you've touched on, I think there's essential workers as well who have become essential and shown how important they are through the pandemic. In terms of how the Key Worker Homes Fund works, we look specifically at that technical government definition. However, we found that there was a lot of kind words around it, but there was not much that happened. And indeed, similarly since the COVID-19 pandemic, key workers suddenly moved from people asking the question, what is a key worker, to everyone broadly knowing what key workers were and thinking they were the heroes of the pandemic. And we were all out hitting frying pans and clapping and cheering in spring. We launched the Key Worker Homes Fund earlier this year. And that was really with the very simple insight that everyone was clapping and everyone was cheering their key workers and giving them a slap on the back. But Mark, I know you've called for this. That doesn't translate to actually impacting their lives. We saw the Chancellor stand up in the Commons earlier this week and not provide the pay rise that I think a lot of us think they deserve. We can't simply have rhetoric. We need to act. We are a business. The way that we are trying to add our impact into this space is by launching the Key Worker Homes Fund. In short, what that is £100 million of equity that we're going to be investing to be able to deliver more homes for key workers, and specifically homes near to where they work. And these aren't just going to be, you mentioned the substandard homes, Amina, that you've seen in Haringey and other places. These are not of that quality. These are beautiful homes, all London plan compliance. These are homes built in the airspace above existing buildings, so we'll have incredible views of the city. They'll be built to the highest sustainability standards, and also will be genuinely affordable to key workers. We actually mid last month, so mid-November, we actually achieved planning permission on our first 15 homes, which are exclusively for key workers who are first-time buyers, with 38% affordable as London living rents, and all marketed solely to key workers and for key worker tenures. And so we're really proud of trying to bring those schemes to market, and that's before the launch of the Key Worker Homes Fund. And what we want to do with this fund specifically is to deliver over the coming years 1,000 homes for London's key workers near to where they work. That is nowhere near enough. I'm not here to say this is a silver bullet. I think our big call today, and what the Key Worker Homes Fund is set up to do, is to work with Councillor Bell, Councillor Ibrahim, to work with London's local authorities, London's housing associations, and say, guys, we've got a problem here. Let's work together to find a solution to find that. £100 million is a start. 15 homes for key workers in Southwark, for local Southwark key workers, is not going to solve any housing crisis, but it's a step in the right direction. And we're here to try and start that conversation and to say, let's build the homes that key workers deserve. So I've got some slides which I can flick through quickly just to give a flavour of some of those pieces. I'm going to try and share my screen briefly, and hopefully these will act as provocations for fellow panelists as well. Great. So I mean, this is really the starting point of the Skyrim white paper. It's saying, and this, it was the compact city model, but I think probably our panelists and audience are probably more now familiar with the terminology of the 15-minute city. It is the same thing. I think often these things goes in cycle, and a rebrand never hurt anyone. But in essence, it's trying to say that we want to be close to where we live, work and play, so as we can thrive in that community. A lot of people misunderstand Skyrim's mission, thinking that we're going to put homes on top of hospitals or on top of fire stations. We're saying no. We're saying that we should be within a 15-minute walk or cycle from their place of work. And the way that we believe that you can deliver affordability in that, because you might say, Paul, you might say, actually, Lewisham Hospital, some of the homes around there are very expensive. The way we attempt to deliver affordability is through taking the land cost out of the equation. Because we started, Toby, with talking about that we have a housing crisis. In fact, we don't believe we have a housing crisis, because in London, 70% of the cost of the home is not actually the home and the architecture and the building. Almost all of that cost is in the land upon which it's built. We don't have a housing crisis in rural Wales, even though the home may be the same. And so what we're trying to do with our mode of development is actually to remove the land cost from that equation, or reduce it significantly by building in the airspace above existing buildings. This means that not only can you deliver incremental density, but also you can try and deliver affordable homes near to where people need to work. And we think the tenure type that is for this are key workers. So, and our mission, I think I've already said this, but our mission is to improve the lives of key workers by delivering homes near to where they work. And we think this is, again, a part of the equation. Mark, you touched on pay rises, which I think are essential. But as you also touched on, Mark, a huge cost for key workers, the biggest line item in their expenditure is the cost of housing, followed shortly by the cost of commuting. So there are two methods through which one can deliver, a quality of life, we believe. One is through a pay rise, but that pay rise would have to be so vast that I think even a chancellor more willing to spend than our current one would be difficult to match it. So we're saying actually there's another way, which is that if you can deliver great homes near to where they work at affordable prices, you can free up that metric of affordability, which is not net cash afterwards, but actually the percentage of income a key worker spends on housing. At the moment, that's far too high. Most key workers are spending over 55% of in London, over 55% of their income on housing, which technically puts them in the bracket of housing poverty. So that's kind of our mission, is to try and relieve that element, though it's obviously, again, a plethora of solutions that's needed. As I mentioned, we've been on this mission for several years, starting off with the white paper, followed by the Home Fund, Key Worker Homes Fund, but we're pleased to say that we're not alone in this. And again, to my call earlier to Councillor Bell and Councillor Ibrahim, we're saying that this is a chorus of voices that we need. The G15 earlier this year released their document, Homes for Heroes, which is called for new homes for key workers. We want to work with the G15 to accelerate delivery of those homes, because again, it's all very well talking about it. We want to see action and people building those homes and funding them. The COVID-19 pandemic has obviously accelerated it, and we've also re-released the white paper in this year as well. And anyone who wants to read it online, we're going to post a link in the chat so they can peruse it at their leisure there. And I think this slide is really the key one, which is, why is this a problem? Because Mark, I think you've probably always been, for your members, and I think probably be the same for those who represent firefighters or doctors or teachers. Price, how much a key worker is paid has always been a problem, but it's never been more acute because of the cost of housing in London, in particular at the moment. And around the time I was born in 1990, the average cost of a London home was around £79,000. Over the course of the ensuing decade, that has increased beyond, I think, anyone's imagination could be. And there's we don't need to go into the details as to why that's happened, but it is what it is at the moment, and we need to look at reality in the face in terms of what that current price is.
Okay.
And the really important piece here is around the divergence between these two pieces. Over the last decade, we've had obviously austerity and challenges with that. where we've seen an increase of house prices continually. However, we've seen a stagnation in key worker pay, and the real term impact on that is enormous. And so the big message, I think, from us today in the Key Worker Homes Fund is saying, we're here, we've got a pool of money that we are keen to invest with local authorities and housing associations to deliver and accelerate the delivery of more homes for key workers. But we are not here to say we're the solution. We're not here to do this alone. We want to work with those on this call and the wider community. So thank you for my time today, and really looking forward to getting involved in the rest of the discussion.
Fantastic, Arthur. That's terrific. Thank you very much. Now, we've got dozens of questions coming in from the audience, and I'm going to hand over in a second to our panel to question you and respond to your offer. But just to establish three really quick fire questions, if you like, quick responses. This is a single model that you're offering of building what I might call rooftop housing. So you're building on top of existing buildings, and there are other models, and the call is for other developers to bring other models on a similar basis to the party, and the G15 are already doing their bit. Rooftop housing, you're saving on the land costs, but are the structural issues that present themselves when you build on top of existing buildings, do they not wipe out any savings that you might be making?
That's a great question, and it's one actually we often get. So the key piece here is around identifying the correct building to work with, and then using different technologies to be able to unlock that land parcel. So we work really closely at the moment with a number of London local authorities and housing associations doing what we call geospatial mapping studies. In essence, this is a piece of proprietary technology that we've developed, which helps us find appropriate parcels of land within a borough and appropriate buildings to then be able to develop above. And we don't, from our perspective, we don't necessarily see it as rooftop housing, because that typically implies perhaps a one-story setback penthouse, which can only be afforded by the super rich Russian oligarch or that kind of thing. We're here to say, actually, if you can deliver what's known as incremental density, we don't think that a big, enormous tower block is the answer, and we also don't think a two-story village feel is the answer. We think it's about the idea of how we can create this compact 15-minute city. How can we get more people into space, but in a really pleasant way, so they have live, work, and play near one another? So we're typically looking at mirroring the massing of an existing building above it. So this might be a development of 2, 3, 4, 5 stories in the airspace above an existing building. For example, the scheme we've recently got planning permission on in Southwark, which, as I say, is specifically targeted at local key workers who work at places like Guy's Hospital. That is actually adding 4 new stories in the airspace above a 3-story building. And that, to your point around making sure that the existing building is compliant and safe and secure, all of that is done through the traditional building process of appointing structural engineers, architects, etc., and making sure that piece is done effectively.
Right.
The key thing, as I say, is in identifying the right buildings and then working with a really sophisticated design team for that. And what we actually are offering as part of the Key Worker Homes Fund is for all local authorities and housing associations to get a free piece of consultancy work, a free piece of advice, in essence, which helps them identify some of the buildings within their portfolio that may be suitable, and fund a feasibility study to work out what the opportunity could be. Because there's, one of the housing associations we work with has a scheme called hidden homes, and these really are hidden homes. These are homes that one did not know existed, but one, through clever technology and different thinking, you can unlock and deliver a lot of value to key workers.
That's terrific, Arthur. Thanks. And the other 2 questions I had, these are quick fire questions, but it deserved a solid answer. Thank you. The other questions are when and how. So how and when can local authorities come to you and ask you for that service and get access to that fund?
Yeah, so the fund is currently going to be launched just before the new year. So this is the first knowledge exchange event. And what we're asking people to do is, if they're interested in hearing more about it, if they're interested in applying for funding from it, or simply just getting a free feasibility study, that they visit our website and sign up with their name. I think a link will be circulated in the chat and indeed afterwards. And so people can get involved really simply. Just insert your email address, and then you'll be sent a ability to get involved and apply.
Lovely, thanks. And my final question before handing over to the panel is where? Is it only London local authorities, only inner London local authorities? Who's eligible?
So eligibility is basically local authorities and housing associations in both inner and outer London. Currently, we're not looking outside of London, although we're not saying that's, our particular focus is London, but I think there are problems elsewhere in the country. Our specific focus is London. That's because we believe that in London that the crisis is most acute, and we are a business, and our focus needs to be constrained somehow. We still want to make a call to action for other local authorities and central government to undertake similar initiatives elsewhere, but our focus is in London. So any London local authority or any London housing association is able to apply for funding and support.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Right, Mark, I'm going to come to you in a second, but first let's ask Paul, what's your response to this offer?
Well, any offer of money is welcome, particularly in the current state of local government finance. However, the devil is always in the detail. So that's what we need to discuss. So, for example, what kind of buildings, in terms of the existing height, do you build on top of? Who actually does construction? How is that tendered? What happens if you're building on top of an existing council building, for example, where we have a mixture of tenant and leaseholders? How that affects Section 20 notices and the fact that leaseholders could be landed with greater bills. We already know the cladding scandal, of which housing associations are not doing a very good job there. So how do we ensure that it doesn't cost existing residents? And who owns it at the end of the day? So if we have a building of 4 stories, for example, and then you build another 4 on top, who actually owns that space? Because even though you take out the land value, there's still the building value, and that's important in terms of ownership. So those are my general responses.
Brilliant. Hold on to those, Arthur. We've got procurement issues, we've got liabilities for existing residents, and we've got ultimate ownership. Amina, would you like to add anything to that list?
Yeah, also kind of one of the challenges that we always face in terms of local planning issues is, character of the local area, conservation areas, things like that. These are some of the challenges we face. Actually, yep, like Paul said, always open to offers of support in terms of what we're doing. I know particularly the leader of our council, Councillor Joe Ejiofor, is particularly interested and always has been. Sorry about the bleeping that's coming from. I've been desperately trying to stop that.
He's emailing you now, telling you to put a bid in.
It probably is actually, no, because he is particularly interested in key worker housing, and particularly interested in building on top of existing buildings. So we may actually certainly be very interested in looking at this, but all of the caveats that Paul has raised and all of the challenges, and also engagement with the local community in terms of kind of like the quality and how it would potentially change the character of a building. Don't think that people are just against 18 stories. You'd be surprised at how much opposition you can get to increasing something to 5-6 stories as well. But we shouldn't be looking at blockages. We should be looking at unlocking the potential, but at the same time making sure that we take people with us. But yeah, certainly open to it.
Fantastic, thanks, Amina. And finally, Mark, what sort of opportunities do you think this might open up? What sort of reservations might you have? And I guess there are going to be issues about design quality and space standards and things like that. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to the list of responses we're going to get from Arthur now?
I think I would naturally aver to Paul and Amina for some of the technical issues that they've highlighted. I'm by no means a housing expert or local council planning expert or anything like that. What I'd be interested to know is, again, one of the things we called for was more creative use of land that the NHS sees as surplus to need. We know that one of the challenges for the NHS is maintaining financial stability. So if they do a review of their estate, see a piece of land or buildings that are, to their mind, not needed anymore, they get sold off to sort of manage the financial demands that are on them. How does Arthur's scheme work with NHS employers, or how could it work with NHS employers to create a more creative use of that surplus land?
Yeah, and actually we've got a webinar coming up later this month on how service transformation in the NHS is driving estate transformation, and that's in just in a couple of weeks. So keep your eye on Voice of Authority for more on that. Arthur, we've got procurement issues, we've got liabilities for existing residents, issues of ownership, and the design challenges and design quality challenges. Would you like to respond to any or all of those?
Yeah, definitely really good questions, and I can add some to the list as well in terms of complexities to the approach as well. Before I delve into that, just to address Mark's question, Mark, I'd love to progress that conversation and take it offline. We've had conversations and massing studies done with NHS property services, and also some projects in the pipeline with different NHS trusts. I think that I'm sure something that you can relate to is the fragmentation of the NHS and how to find a coordinated approach across it, plus the competing priorities of, obviously delivery and then freeing up capital. So it's a really exciting opportunity and ties in precisely with what we're trying to do. I think the key is how we can unlock that. In terms of the kind of questions around procurement, the challenges here, the really short answer is we have a very detailed FAQs document which addresses all of this in granular detail. So I will also circulate this afterwards. However, to just take a few of them head on, the most important thing from a Skyrim and the Key Worker Homes Fund perspective is respecting and retaining the existing communities and residents in a building. That is kind of the starting point for every single project we do and central to it. Because unlike other modes of development, this isn't knocking down things and pushing a whole bunch of people out and then building a new block. This requires existing resident support and community engagement from the outset. It's not an afterthought, it's not lip service, that is the number one priority for us. The way that we then can unlock a number of those other challenges is things such as, yes, how do you survey a building and make sure it's got the structural integrity perspective? How do you avoid displacement and decanting of residents? How do you retain the embodied carbon from an environmental perspective within that building? And all of that is taking place as part of that early engagement process. With that, we then get involved architects, engineers, etc., all of whom work with existing residents to say, actually, is there a way we can use cyclical maintenance? This will free up capital. Can we invest in the existing building? On projects we do, we replace lift shafts, we install green roofs, we improve communal areas and play areas, etc., etc. So freeing up that capital can often reduce service charges, improve the existing building through cyclical maintenance. And again, Paul, it's definitely not going to solve the cladding issue. But I think the government's £1 billion fund has already been spent on cladding issues. And so there are going to be a lot of housing associations and local authorities who need cash to be able to resolve some of those cladding issues within their existing stock. And so through all of those processes, we're trying to resolve some of those elements. Again, it's not a silver bullet for all of them, but it's through that community engagement process. We think actually the residents more often than not know best and a lot more about their building than we do, even if we are architects and all the rest of it.
Great stuff, Arthur. Thanks. Okay, we've got lots of questions coming in from our viewers. There's one from Luke Newman for you, Mark. Are there differences between inner London and outer London in terms of how willing nurses or how keen nurses are to move or to leave London and to leave the profession, or is it pretty stable across the city?
I think the problems are widespread across the city.
Yeah.
I can't think from when we did our survey that we were able to break it down sort of by borough for responses, but the recruitment and retention challenge for the nursing workforce is widespread across the whole city.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much. Arthur, have you done any studies into the number of key workers that there are in London? Have you got an idea of the sort of population you're looking to service?
It's difficult to get precise numbers on it because, again, definitions of key workers and the fungibility of some government numbers mean it's quite difficult to get a specific number on it. The report that we refer to is a 2010 report, which estimates there are around 1 million key workers who work in London. And that's using the government definition of it. How many live in London is a different question. But we're certainly talking hundreds of thousands of key workers supporting a population of, let's call it 8.5 million Londoners. So it's it's not an insignificant portion of the population.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you. Thanks very much for that. Okay, and obviously what we were talking about earlier in terms of defining key workers and getting some sort of London-wide definition would be really useful. And there are viewers that are calling for that as well. Can I come to you, Paul and Amina now? Paul, starting with you, we've got an anonymous attendee, which I always worry about. Oh, and by the way, we've had questions. Richard Olson out there is waving his hand, trying to get our attention. Richard, I'm not going to give you the stage, I'm afraid. The stage is reserved for our panelists. But if you've got a question you'd like to put, please do put it through the Q&A, and we'll try to get to it. And viewers, if there are any questions that are left over that we don't get a chance to deal with today, we will be putting those to our panel, and when they've got the time and the opportunity, we'll be asking them to respond by email, and we'll be circulating those responses through the LinkedIn members club for the Voice of Authority, which my colleague Finn will put into the chat for you to remind you to join up after this. Now, we've got the anonymous attendee, always a worry, but the question is good, I think. Currently, local authority housing policy acknowledges social rent. However, this does not support key workers. How can local authorities action a change to assure that policy also supports key workers, and therefore within planning, key worker housing be accepted as a valid policy compliant provision of affordable housing? Can I put that one to you, Paul, and then Amina?
It's a very complicated question. Obviously, social housing has very clear definitions around who is eligible. Not the original concept of social housing, as an old MP who's sadly no longer with us, had lived in a council property for his entire life. The issue is you should be able to choose and want to live in a council property. At the moment, they're rationed because of right to buy and because there's not enough supply. So the housing crisis that exists in the supply of social housing is a problem. So every local authority has to ration it and has policies such as the allocations policy and the annual lettings plan in order to do that. In terms of key workers, we are developing key workers, or will be developing key workers allocation policy for the Besson Street development. So we'll be going through this process ourselves. But in terms of affordable housing, which is a definition within planning, because I also look after planning as well as regen, the issue is complex because discounted market sale, social rent, you've got London affordable rent, you've got London living room, all these things are included in the planning process, but they're funded by Section 106. And of course, the changes to planning for the future that the government's proposed, which has basically gone down like a cold cup of sick, is about abolishing Section 106 and having a national formula for how you set the targets for affordable housing. And something called IL, which I think is rather adequately named, the infrastructure levy amount that they'll be allocating to this will be, it's just not going to work for London. So in the future, in terms of allocation and delivery of affordable housing, if those changes go through, we are going to be even more constrained to what we can do. But in terms of key workers, I think from this conversation, London authorities, London local councils, we need to look at how to define it. But also people, when you define something, there's always people on the margins that are not included in that. So we want to try avoid that as well, because anybody who provides a public service, whether it's your supermarket shopping or the cleaner that goes to Canary Wharf, for example, we need to develop policy that is encompassing of all rather than defining set groups, because otherwise people will just fall through the net.
Thank you, Paul.
Just to jump in there, Paul, very quickly. Sorry, Toby. The Key Worker Homes Fund in particular, and I really recognise the scheme that you've got underway as well, but the Key Worker Homes Fund in particular, what we're really excited about is moving from kind of reports and definitions to moving to delivery. And I think that the COVID-19 pandemic has really highlighted, there have been a lot of reports on these sorts of things and a lot of talk around whether it be MMC or airspace development or key worker housing, etc. But now I think is a really good opportunity to, now start delivering. So what I would look for, our elected officials such as yourself to do is let's move from more reports and definitions to, more homes.
Amina.
Yeah, so I mean, to add to what's being said, I think actually, the reality is Paul has hit the nail on the head. I mean, over the last 10, 15 years, we've kind of reached that perfect storm of the impact of right to buy actually on access to council housing. So if we were talking about this 40 years ago, you wouldn't be differentiating between, and you wouldn't need to have a specific policy on key workers and people who are now priority need, because the reason why councils have had to kind of create these systems of priority need is because of the dwindling and the rationalization of council housings. But 30 years ago, ago, you know, somebody who's a key worker could just apply as anyone else and would have just as good a chance of getting a council property as somebody who would now be considered to have some kind of a priority need. And I think that's where the challenge is. But we also have to kind of look at what makes a council home desirable in London, because there are those who would argue, who are not of my political taste, that, you know, what's desirable about a council home? Of course it's desirable. It's they're often at a high quality. You know, many are built to Parker Morris standards, especially some of the some of the ones that we've got in London. And we've also got the added importance, which is really important to key workers, which is security of tenure. It's not just the rent levels, it's the security of tenure. And that's what's come to even more important kind of highlighting and spotlighting is what's happened over the last year, with the government having to intervene and say and bringing regulations about evictions, because the reality is that assured tenancies, you know, 2 months rent arrears is a mandatory grounds of evictions. What we know with council tenancies is that it's a discretionary ground of eviction, and that's the key difference. And ultimately what we know is that the security that a council tenancy provides means that, yes, there will be times where people will fall on, you know, hard financial times, but having that security of tenure absolutely means that at least they know that they won't be evicted from their home. And I think that's the key difference. And I think that's what we need to be extending and pushing further, not rolling back security of tenure, but actually increasing it and making kind of homes that are built outside the kind of public sector start to reflect a little bit more of what the public sector tenancies look like, because that will ultimately kind of, you know, it will make sure that when we're talking in these environments about what is so wonderful, and I believe it's wonderful, of a council tenancy, we need to just stop saying it's just about affordability. It's also about security as well.
Absolutely. Amina, thank you for that. We're going to be talking about our great estates, the value of council estates to the cities in which they're located in just a couple of weeks. So all of these kind of cross-threading issues we're looking forward to tackling in more detail. But Amina, you've had the last word today. It's 5 p.m. Our hour is up. It's just the first hour of several viewers, and we're going to be back with Skyroom on the 13th of January in a session titled Build Up, Not Out, the Economy of Location, Livability and Longevity. And we'll update you on the progress made by the Key Worker Homes Fund then. Finn, my colleague, will be putting a link to that session into the chat for you. Meanwhile, viewers, please join me in thanking our excellent panel. It's been a delight to spend an hour with you. It's whizzed by. Thank you so much for your thoughtful contributions to the discussion today, panel. We're really grateful for you taking the time, particularly now when time has never been more precious, to share your experience and insight with us. Thank you for doing that, Councillor Paul Bell of Lewisham Council. Thank you, Councillor Amina Ibrahim from Haringey Council. And thank you, Mark Farmer from the Royal College of Nursing. And thank you, Arthur Kay from the Key Worker Homes Fund, both for your contribution to the conversation today and for your generous sponsorship of the event. But most of all, viewers, as ever, thank you for, again, tuning in to grace us with your attention and your stimulating questions. Those that are left hanging, we will be putting through the LinkedIn Members Club shortly, so do go back there over the coming days. We're going to be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. to discuss urban air mobility, the risks and opportunities for local authorities with David Jones, Bould and Vectos. You can register for that and watch the video of this and all our other sessions at thevoiceofauthority.co.uk. If you'd like to get involved in these sessions as a sponsor or as a speaker, and why wouldn't you, please email me, toby@threefox.co.uk. Until next week, I beg your pardon, until tomorrow, from our panel, from Key Worker Homes Fund and Skyroom, and from me and from everyone at Three Fox. Good evening.